welcome back to the Brightworks. Now, I just finished up this match, and originally I wasn't planning on recording it, just playing for fun, but it actually ended up being a real gobsmacker, back and forth, real fisticuffs type of match, and I figured I might as well show you guys because there's some really fun plays here, and I think there's a lot of stuff to learn from this match, but also it just ended up being a really cool game. I'm super proud of it, of course, and I wanted to show you guys. So without further ado, let's start this match up at 1x speed. This is a replay, of course, and so for the first time, we're going to be checking out a match from the replay file. It got me thinking that if anybody here has replays that they'd like to send in, any of the viewers, and they have replays, I'll let me know in the comments if that's something interesting, and if I see people that have replays that they want me to commentate, then I'd be more than happy to do that for them. If I see the support for that, I'll set up some sort of system, an email or something like that, and we'll get that all sorted out. Anyways, getting into the match, we have a blue and red team, as you're probably very well familiar with now. Myself, I am playing a backline position on the Blues team here. I'm the bright green. We have a few other players here. Synthetic will be making some interesting plays this game, as well as Wisdom, Andy, and Sirius, who you can see playing the start and front, or the back and the front position, both starting with Air Labs. So you can see we're trying to convince them not to here up in the chat. I make fun of him a little bit here, but we'll get to that later on in the match, and I'll highlight exactly why you don't do this if you haven't heard me go on and on about that already. Now we do have Fields down here in blue. He's going to be playing in the middle area, sort of contesting the Hot Lips of Hot Lips. Oh, by the way, did I mention this map is called Hot Lips Remake, version 3.1. So kind of an interesting idea. The interesting part to this map is that bots can walk up and down these hills, but vehicles cannot. So it's very easy to take these hills with bots, but much more difficult to traverse with vehicles. But there's also these nice big open terrain features here. Can I draw on replays? Oh, I can. That's wonderful. So I don't annoy anybody by drawing in the replays. That's great. Now, let's see. There's some early game harassment coming out from Electro 97. I do like to see that headed out towards this base. And you can see with these scouts, he does find. Does he actually? Let's see what he sees here. He doesn't. Well, he sees the transport right there. I wonder if that keys him in. That maybe something's going on up there. But he does take a look around here, and indeed these two ticks are just going to run right by. You can see there's no defense here or anything, and he immediately spots this base. Oh, what's that? You started with an air lab. All right, well, I'll just send my ticks in, and there's no way to contest this. I think by this point I had a bot lab up, so I was going to start sending over some units. But I mean, if you need more than this, well, you shouldn't. This is the justification for why you don't go for an air start. You can see now he has only the metal production from his comm. I guess he's captured a mech up here as well. Kind of a rough spot to be in, as well as you've also let in, these ticks to attack your teammates as well. Looks like he was given a comm in order to rebuild over here, but these ticks being a absolute nuisance. Do we have any other harassment going on? Doesn't look like it. It looks like mostly just lines are being set up here. I'm playing a very passive role in this game. I just decided to tech for my teammates since, I've been playing a bunch of front lines recently, and I felt like teching. Not much more to it than that. I am stalling quite viciously here on metal. I think I intended to sacrifice my comm, but then I realized I might want to keep it around for a little while. This is another thing I did that later on came to fruition. Building this line of anti-air turrets, you can see queued up. That will play a key role here, because you can see. Well, maybe they haven't started yet. Eventually, they're going to go for bombers. Kind of interesting that I get to cast this with knowing what's going to happen. I'll try not to spoil it, but sometimes I'm not going to be able to help myself. Penguin's pushing out into the middle of the lips. Looks like he's going to capture this mechs as well as all this nice metal tied up in rocks and whatnot over here. It's a good line to hold. Electro 97 actually has a huge front line here. You can see he's pushed super, super far forward. Great for him because it does mean that he gets these 2 extra mechs, both pumping out 1 metal per second, just under. I think they're underproducing because he's stalling on energy, which is a bummer, but that can be remedied. Ugias has also started pumping out some units and sending them towards the front line. Got some Rocketeers headed out, but also a line of pawns to secure the front there. Dr. Penguins has a nice front line here, but you can see that Electro has now pushed a bunch of pawns through here and absolutely destroyed Sirius's base. All these pawns are pretty low, so I have a pawn over here to contest all of them, but eventually, they're going to melt it down. I think, eventually I clean this up. At this point, I was pretty annoyed with this teammate, just kind of designed to let them live out their fate on top of that hill. But I did start up another bot lab in hopes of building more resurrection bots to resurrecting their base. But that doesn't quite go to plan. Light skirmishing down here by Crafter and Blade Runner, pushing into these aggravators. I like to see that. That's what those pawns are good at. And he does degun the turret. It's always nice. Are we going to trade the comms here? Could try. Nope, we're just going to soak the damage and nuke their army right there. Well, I don't really think that was the right move. Blade Runner now has access to a whole lot of metal. That explains how he got such a pressing advantage down here later on in the match, but that's, of course, that's 2,000 extra metal. Even a little more from all the units and stuff too, but quite a big chunk of metal that is now going to be Blade Runners, or at least under Blade Runner's control. Now, in my mind, I'm sort of jumping back and forth between strategies. I want to tech up. I know I need to tech up. I don't have the metal for it. I don't have the economy for it. But I do have my commander still, which is a good 2,000 metal laying around. But I'm sending out these resurrection bots to go res all this. And I tell him resing and try to get his attention here. You'll see I really try to get his attention here. It doesn't work. Long story short, he doesn't care, and he just eats up all this base for his own. And I'm so annoyed about this because now I have all these resurrection bots that I built, and there's nothing left to resurrect, so kind of just in a weird spot there. But I do just switch them to gather energy for me, gather up all these plants, and cut my losses there. I do move my comm over here, and I'm going to start self-destructing it eventually to reclaim that metal. Looks like we are trying to reclaim some of this metal, or recapture some of this metal, maybe is a better word for it. Not super successfully, though. Blade Runner, rather than teching off that metal, just using it to produce more units and secure a nice advantage here. Of course, when you produce the metal, this was a comment that I think, it confused me a little bit, but I think I understood what the confusion was about. Somebody was asking me about why it's better to reclaim bot labs and whatnot in some of the build orders that I've shown. And the reason for that is that you reclaim 100% of the metal that you put into something. So if you're using your own units to deconstruct one of your buildings, you get 100% of the metal out of that building once you reclaim it. So if you're looking to reclaim your own structures, that metal isn't gone. It's just tied up in that building at the moment. Now, units off the ground, that's a different story. The units do lose a little bit of metal as they're destroyed, but it's a small price to pay, and as long as you have a commander or res bots or whatever at the front lines, you're going to be able to reclaim enough of that metal, assuming that you trade out with the enemy to turn a profit, essentially. Now, Bugius has kind of rooted himself in here, got a nice line of laser turrets, some Rocketeers and pawns, the whole army. Very nice composition. I think it's a great composition. Mobile, but can deal out enough damage at range that it can be devastating. Huge amount of pawns go in there, but don't really achieve much, which is just going to be metal for Bugius' machine. You can see him sort of dancing back and forth here with Sirius's army. Sirius taking a lot of losses, but he doesn't have a way to reclaim all this metal, so that's going to put him at a pretty big disadvantage. Now, I do have this line of pawns that I'm sort of dancing back and forth here. I probably should have just given these to Synthetic so that he could control them, but at the end of the day, I felt like I could do a little bit better control and also just alleviate the micro that he had to do by moving my pawns up and keeping them under my control. Sort of a trade-off, right? But anyway, using his units, his Rocketeers back there to deal some damage, but I also have my scavenger bots up here. So my intention here, and this is a tip that I would give all you, is fight with the intent to reclaim your enemies and your own units. So right, I basically started that fight with the idea that I was going to use these res bots to reclaim everything. And I don't get everything here, but I get enough metal that I think it was worth it in the end, because it also depleted their army and meant that Synthetic now had a much better time dealing with that up there. Less of a snowball, I guess you could say. Now, Blade Runner has a nice advantage here up in the north. He's kind of pushed up here. There's a nice open spot right here, which is sort of a weak point for us, but luckily nobody's pressing it at the moment. There are also artillery. That's kind of a hard one to say. There are also artillery. Wow. I'm handing out T2 commanders, or rather T2 constructors, to all my teammates, just so they can get their economies up and running. I believe I gave one to, I handed one out to Dr. Penguins and Sirius. And here's those bombers I was talking about early on. You can see he did not send out a scout craft, or if he did, it got shot down somewhere. And these are all clumped up also. So there's a light AoE on these, and you can see they just get torn apart. And I brag about this a little bit. You can see I write a little message here. Wait for it. I do a lot of airplay. Can't help myself from bragging a little bit. Whoa, there's a little bit of a lag spike. Sorry about that. Let me just make sure that this is all toggled properly. There we go. Yeah, and you can see that this front here is being pushed forward more and more. And I think, well, he's going to tech here eventually, or he's got to. But I guess he's going for a little bit more energy production before he gets there. Joram, on the other hand, has already gone up to tech 2, but he isn't producing any units. He's still just upgrading his own economy, so that's going to be a little ways out. It looks like Tall Geese has also upgraded his T2 economy. Love that name, by the way. What a hilarious name. He's got these Sheldons out, which can just feel so frustrating to play against. They have such a high range. They're relatively fast. They don't do a crazy amount of damage, but especially against bots, they really can be quite painful. And that being said, it looks like Fields has kind of had enough of this long-standing occupation of this hill over here, so he's going to move his tanks in. The Brutes. I love these tanks. I really think they're great. But that does accidentally expose his artillery to these Grunts and Sheldons, which get picked apart. See very quickly. Now it looks like most of the Grunts are going to get shelled off. The Grunts are going to get blasted down by these plasma shells from the Brutes, but at the cost of their own lives. And they are moving in here. They take out the radar dish, which I suppose is alright, but don't quite clear those laser tower, which is a bit of a shame. We do have some Grunts of Field's own holding on up here. And it looks like Blade Runner is just pressing forward more and more and more. This bottom team now holding on for their dear lives. Looks like 150 Griffin. I actually get annoyed with him later on in the game because I didn't see him producing anything, but I guess, you know, he's putting out a lot of army. So if you're watching this 150 Griffin, I do apologize. You know, you were putting in your work. Should have respected that. Tempers were flared. I was a bit worried about this game, I won't lie. This one was, it was looking dire. You can see we're sort of losing this southern flank, and I couldn't quite tell how fast we were losing it either. It looked like there was a huge army down there, but at the same time, it was just Rocketeers, and we had a big army as well. So sort of hard to tell what the danger level is right there. Sort of hard to assess. And we do have these Sheldons laying down fire on this T1 vehicle lab. Very annoying. Let's check out what I'm up to. Okay, so I've taken down my T2 bot lab in favor of building a reactor, and I've already thrown up 2 advanced energy converters, so that as soon as this kicks online, I'm going to be able to power these, and once they're powered up, we're going to have a nice extra 20 metal income, which is going to be phenomenal for increasing, you know, spiraling our eco. I do send this construction bot to go build a whole line of construction turrets. something to be aware of, right? Like if you're scaling your economy, you know that you're going to need somewhere big and flat to build up the rest of your economy. So just find somewhere nice and go start up a big eco. Starting up some more of these T1 energy converters because I noticed that my teammates are leaking a lot. So I want to take advantage of that if I can. Something I advise you to do as well if you're noticing that your enemy are they're stalling. They're not stalling. They're leaking. They're accessing energy. Make sure that you take advantage of it because it's better that somebody does than the energy just gets wasted. If you understand what I mean. Sheldon's taking a minute to fire on that tower. That's a little odd. Having a moment of hesitation, contemplating what they've done. Now this front line looks absolutely unbreakable from Blade Runner. He's really got a nice big army, but you know, I guess that is a lot of metal and grunts right there. Looking at 1,764 metal versus 2,500 metal. I mean, these should win 100% of the time, except that the grunts can engage from better angles. Excuse me, and they're quite a bit faster as well, so they can outmaneuver a lot more. Maybe Blade Runner smells that in the air and decides to back off. Either way, he decides not to engage, not to push any further, even though if he did, he might catch this quite an inopportune time. Really big metal stall right here, so that could have been a game-winning play if Blade Runner had continued to push this and had us forced to respond to that quite a bit sooner. Now, Fields is getting these T2 Fiends out, which, if you've played against them, you know how devastating they can be, and if you play with them, you know how tremendous they are to play with. I do get a T1 bot lab up, and I start to spam some scout units up because I'm a little bit worried about these Sheldons pushing in here. At this point, I didn't actually know how big of an army this was. I just see the shells coming in, so I need to figure out what I'm actually dealing with here. That's my reasoning behind spamming these T1 ticks. The other thing is if you're ever dealing with an artillery unit, you can spam ticks out, and a lot of the times you'll be able to convince these artilleries to accidentally overcorrect and fire into each other, which can be a way to use your enemy's firepower against them. Extremely frustrating to play against if somebody manages to do that to you, but the way you counter that is just by spreading out your artillery more and more. Now, Talgeese begins taking this high ground here, which is a great position for him because it really kind of gives him a direct pathway into these bases down here. And at this point, I realize that the tick spam isn't really cutting it, so I do start up a T2 bot lab. Sort of just realizing that, you know, I'm going to need something a little better if I want to actually do any damage to these. But the tick spam has done enough to stall this attack long enough that the Field's infantry can get out, and especially these fiends can come out and start to roast these guys. You can see that they will make short work of these artillery. Getting in there and doing enough AoE damage to really dissuade them. And then this whole push is routed. Talgeese sort of stepping down here. I guess he wanted to divert as much of this attack as possible. If there is one T1 unit to use against these guys, I would have to say that the tanks are a pretty good option, especially on an open field, because I think they can catch up to these Sheldons, and they are pretty resistant to this light artillery fire. So that's one option. Now, the northern area has fallen pretty badly, which I do notice right now actually, and start to send these T2 sprinters around. I think I'm going to send these up north because this area is now looking a little bit uncontrolled. I don't like to see that. This is a dangerous passageway because this does lead right back into the hearts of everyone else's base as well. You can see mirrored down on the south side. If you break through this, you can sweep all the way back behind, which may or may not become something relevant later. Now this metal extractor has actually gone uncontested for the entire match. It was just put up and then never got touched again. Kind of an oversight by the enemy team to let Dr. Penguins hold on to that for so long. And we do see a nice big skirmish happening here. Sort of an epic battle. Let's get a nice little cinematic shot of that. They're all walking away. We have these gunships coming in too. Sort of cleaning up that mess up there. And that attack is routed. Now there's a huge bombing run coming in here. I don't know if I noticed this in the actual game or not, but quite a big bombing run. And then I have this idea, right? So I'm trying to, at this point I zoom out, give you some tips here, but I zoom out and I'm thinking, okay, what can I do? Like, where's unguarded. I need to do some sort of damage to even this playing field here. And the first thing I noticed is, okay, well, there's all this water here. I can build these platypus, which are amphibious, and I can send them across the water and try and send them into somebody's base here. The other thing I noticed is that Tallgeese has pulled all his forces away and positioned them up on this hill, which means that I can sneak these sprinters through to the enemy's base down here. And indeed, I managed to get these up onto the hill, taking advantage of this terrain and taking a look. Now, here's something that really sucked. You'll notice that it's 19 minutes in and nobody remembered to get an anti-nuke. So unfortunately, Fields takes a huge hit. I mean, basically his entire economy is just destroyed. And that really sucks. That really is quite a bummer. But I don't think he realized just how much I was able to sneak past, how many of these sprinters I was able to get past this barricade here and move into the enemy base. Somehow one of them got stuck over here. That's a bit odd. But yeah, you can see these things just absolutely ravaged Blade Runner's production. He almost had a T2 fusion reactor up, and it just got completely denied, which must have been super frustrating for him. Looks like the T2 constructor didn't get killed. Could have been better to kill that, but oh well. And at this point, I think Fields taps out, or he thinks about it. Yeah, he says, I don't think we're going to win anyways. Well, Fields, boy, do I have a surprise in mind for you. We do have some light anti-aircraft up here, turning away these gunships as well as some fighters. So good to see that Purple was wise enough to build some fighters of his own to contest that sort of thing. It's definitely what we want to see. Now, it looks like Synthetic... was that since... Oh, no, it wasn't Synthetic. It was... Well, I'm forgetting his name. Oh, I guess we can see it here. Oh, it won't show me. All right. Well, the player up north decided to tap out, and so Synthetic took over and regrouped his forces and lumped them in with his own. You can see the Dr. Penguins now has this tremendous force up front, so he splits off some of those to go recapture that hill and contest it. And you can see that I'm starting to send these platypus around. Unfortunately, it was scouted, so this whole attack kind of fails and washes off. I decided to just cut my losses here, and rather than try and push into that, I just retreat these guys and hope that I can reuse them somewhere else. Now, Fields does tap out here, and I decide that I'm going to take advantage of that and take everything. So I pick up his commander, and I cloak it, and I start moving it towards the enemy. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, well, I can at least use this to buy myself a few precious seconds to build up my own economy and pump out some units of my own. In the meantime, Tallgeese actually moves his commander forward. I'm not sure if he realized what was happening, but I am able to snipe it and cause this huge explosion, wiping out maybe half of his Sheldons here. At the meantime, starting up Sprinter production, which is a decent counter to these Sheldons because they're just fast enough. Now the front line down here is starting to fall, which is unfortunate to see. But it looks like they're holding long enough. We've got enough vehicles down there to keep pressure on. But the platypus have returned home, and immediately I'm like, oh, wait a minute, these Sheldons are out and exposed. I can just catch these with the platypus that I sent back. And indeed, they managed to actually catch most of these, the remainder of these, and push them back. And then I didn't know it, but I wondered, maybe these can walk up this hill. And sure enough, they struggle with it. They're pretty bad, but very slowly, eventually they're going to make it up that hill. Now, Dr. Penguin's doing a great job holding this line, although he is under siege from this artillery. This is a good hold on this, simultaneously holding this hill and middle. But there's a big contingent of fiends pushing up north that we have to keep our eyes on. I managed to clear this whole top section of all of its laser turrets, which is really important. And this bottom section, you can see it's slowly being pushed back by these Mortys, or rather these Sheldons. Mortys and Sheldons, sort of the same name for different type of unit. And you can see these platypus push in here and actually manage to take out most of these laser turrets. Now, Blade Runner with a good play here, cloaking his commander and waiting. I wondered if maybe I was going to be able to get him with these platypus, actually take his commander down, but I severely overestimated how much damage these things could actually do. So I only got him about to half health, which maybe not the best use of those, but it worked out fine anyways. Now a nuke hits this army right here, and that sets us on the back foot for sure. Definitely hurt a lot to see that. But we're just trying our best to basically hold the front line long enough I do have this res bot here, which is taking advantage of this huge amount of units that went down. I switched to making welders and hounds because I figure there's so much metal that's just lying on the ground here that I'm going to have the economy from recycling in order to actually produce those units. You can see our team is falling apart here. This person on the bottom gave up already and synthetic took over, and I didn't realize that that was synthetic. So if you pay attention, you'll see synthetic is now fighting on the top of the map and the bottom of the map simultaneously, which just, I mean, tremendous props to him for managing that. That's a really difficult task, switching back and forth between those. You can see his APM is taxed here when these pawns run past his base, and he's not reacting to it with his fiends. But luckily, his teammate is moving in with the gunships to try and clean this up. Does the fusion go down? Looks like it will be saved. Wow, those gunships do a lot of AoE. I didn't know that. But yeah, those pawns are wiped out by those gunships, and it actually holds for a little while. Yeah, he says FML is setting up south. Yeah, I bet he was. You can see he's building these defenses and whatnot, and he's got a whole lot of artillery being pumped out here. But he holds, and it's exactly what we need. I'm starting up advanced fusion reactors. I'm starting to get these built so that I can actually produce the units that I want to. And on this map, I'm thinking, okay, well, I want something fast and light and capable of traversing this terrain, all the terrain, including the water. So my mind immediately goes to the, what are they called? Well, I guess you'll just have to wait and see, because I'm ironically blanking on the name right now, even though I just hyped them up. Marauders, that's the name. I guess you won't have to wait. Marauders is the unit that my mind jumps to, so I'm already thinking about producing those. I just know that I have to get my T3 up, which usually requires maybe 2 APHIS in order to fund. Now, luckily, Purple has got a T3 up already and is starting to pump out these Shiva, which are just a tremendous siege unit. You can really break basically any T2 defense, T1 and T2 defense with a couple of Shiva. Meanwhile, I'm starting to send hounds down south to contest these Mortys, these Sheldons that are pressing fire down here. But luckily for me, they kind of walk into the fire, into the field of fire of all these T1 Arty, which are, I think they were queued up on accident, but they actually ended up being extremely useful here. Just completely devastating that whole army. Now I'm looking at these new units that are coming up, these fiends, and that's when I decided to switch from the plasma shot to the Gauss cannon, because these are faster and lighter, and I'm more likely to hit them if I switch to the Gauss. So you'll see these shots switched over to the Gauss mode there. That's a little tip for you if you're looking to use hounds in your own gameplay. By now, anti-nuke is up, so this nuke is now firing into nothing, which is good to see. That's important. Important that we stop those and don't take any more damage. We've already lost a player to it. And just as importantly, I've also got reclaim bots, I think, somewhere around here. Maybe it must have been killed, so I'm just sending this guy forward. It crosses my mind at some point, and I throw butlers into the queue so that I have some sort of unit that I can use to reclaim stuff with. I really don't want them to get their hands on all this metal here. See, I'm furiously trying to attack all their reclaim bots. But I'm slowly building up this army of welders and sprinters up on this side here, and I'm wondering, okay, what is the next area I want to secure? Well, I know there's a commander wreck up here. That's 2,000 metal that I want to secure, so maybe that's the next area I should go. Sort of looking around, but I think north is basically secured because of all this Shiva that are produced here. These are going to be pretty hard to get past, as well as these sumo. I mean, this is a really strong army that Dr. Penguins is pushing out here. Yeah, he's got a good queue. 9 sumo, a radar jammer, and then 9 Sheldon. It's very nice. Now, we don't exactly have any fronts that I would consider that we're winning at the moment. I mean, this is a good push here. This push can go very far into enemy lines, and I think it will. But currently, at the moment, this is kind of looking very desperate. We're not in a very good look here. So I'm wondering, okay, maybe I should test the defenses here and see like what are we actually dealing with? What's the what does our enemy actually have as far as defenses here? And so, although I didn't know it, you can see by my vision, there's actually a factory up here producing these T2 units. So I inadvertently cut off all of the production for Blade Runner, all of his T2 unit production. I accidentally cut off by sending these sprinters and welders up this way, which is going to be a payoff that's huge. Now you can see this push doing tremendous work. getting very deep in enemy territory here. A lot of these Shiva have gone down, but enough of them have made it through. Enough being one, just as a testament to how powerful they are. But you can see it just laying down absolute firepower. Take a sip of water here as we watch the Shiva wreak havoc. A little bit of ASMR for you. Looks like it gets one hit off on Bugis before it gets degunned. And there we go. So you can see that now that I'm up to 2 advanced fusions, I do plop down my experimental gantry, my T3 units, and I start pumping out Marauder almost as soon as I can. And once I saw this factory, I knew, okay, we actually are in a really good spot here, because that means that now that this factory is gone, this whole southern side is actually going to be really exposed, because this is basically just a really open area now. I mean, there's some light laser turrets and stuff, but those are all going to get mopped up by T2 units pretty easily. I see these fiends coming in, and oh, he's actually self-destructing. That's not a bad idea if you're going into a clump of welders, because they will tear you apart pretty easily. Oh yeah, you can see in the chat there I've been harassing 150 Griffin. I think I looked at him and I just saw that there's no units here. Like, he's just not doing anything, and I was just trying to figure out if he was still in the game or not. You know, I'd already taken one player. I guess I was wondering if I was going to have to take another. Now, big prop to Wisdom Andy. I didn't realize it at first, but he really is holding this top lane really well. These Shiva are nothing short of necessary, right? They're exactly what we need, because they put up enough damage to deal with all these T2 units and stop it. Okay, so this is a point where Synthetic looks down south and he sees that basically my entire army is there, and he hands everything to me, and I was kind of confused because I was like, what? Why are you giving me all this stuff? And then he says, I focus north, and it's at that moment that it clicks that this is the same player controlling north and south at the same time, and I'm just like, oh, okay. And all my questions were answered in that one moment where I was like wondering why, a whole bunch of stuff, and there it was. Now there's all these units here, and there's these paralyzers. What are they called? The Shuriken. Kind of a cool unit design. Little stunner, little paralyzer EMP drones. Any of the lightning bots, anything that does lightning damage is actually resistant to being paralyzed. So they're pretty ineffective against these guys. But I see that and I say, okay, well, I've got a unit that has light anti-air attack, the Marauder. And so I just send these guys through. And at this point, these welders have kind of been standing up on this hill for a while, and I wonder just how much defense there actually is for the enemy team in this area. And I'm wondering, okay, maybe I can actually push through here. Maybe there's room here for some sort of attack. And indeed, it would turn out that is a weak spot, as you can see in the spectator vision. Of course, I didn't know this in player view. I had a rough idea of where the base was, sort of. And that's kind of all I saw. I really just wanted to make sure that these welders had their reinforcements that they needed. When realistically, these Marauders actually end up being more than enough to deal with the defenses here. You can see now tearing apart these Shuriken, as well as some of these lighter units. And at this point, I think, okay, well, let's do a little bit of probing. This is a nice contingent of, what do we got there? Six Marauders, eight Marauders, mixed in with a bunch of welders, and they're snipers. So kind of the idea with snipers, and just in time too. You can see a nuke just landed there, just after I moved all my units out. But I see these snipers, and so I think, okay, well, I basically, it's do or die now, because they're gonna destroy these. They're gonna destroy these units pretty quickly if I don't push into here. So I just send the Marauders through, hoping that I can get some damage. And indeed, it actually ends up being the right decision, because they managed to push all the way back here. And this was the start of the turning point, because up until now, not a single one of our lanes really looked like we were winning it very well. And then I managed to sneak these units back here into the back of the base. And I'll admit I'm gloating a little bit, because I'm really proud of this play, but I think it's important to highlight exactly why you don't tap out of a game too early, because your back line is teching for a reason, right? And so now I've got all these units that I can send in, and there's a lot of damage that I can do with this stuff, so it's worth it to just wait and hold out as long as you can. And I definitely got to give props to my northern team because they're doing just the same thing. They see the push down south and realize, okay, the armies are going to be split, dealing with whatever. So let's push in and do some damage while we can. And these Shivas managed to make it all the way to this base, blow up a bunch of those chain reactors, and put in a bunch of hurt here. You can see that T2 factory getting dangerously low. You can see these two players are basically wiped off the map. These, I think this was, well, they couldn't have been pink. Maybe that was yellow or Blade Runner. Either way, whoever this player was right here just got completely decimated, and then the Blade Runner's last remaining base down here is sort of being bypassed more or less, but it doesn't really have anything super valuable here. Sending out these nukes in desperation, but by this point we've thoroughly anti-nuked because, once one nuke hits, you learn your lesson pretty quick. I have a whole batch of Marauders moving in now, sending those through the water, and I realize, okay, there's probably a weak point here that I can harass by sending a bunch of Marauder through. I also inherited a constructor when I took over for Fields, and I set up these 2 bot labs preemptively, knowing that I was eventually going to need them. The other thing that I queued up, where I don't see the constructor that I queued it with, but you see that I've queued a little bit more build power down here, as well as a air lab. And that's because I know that eventually I'm going to want to be able to bomb some of these guys in order to push for that final bit of economy damage. Basically just to knock them out of the game. So you can see these Marauders going around here. And indeed I gambled correctly that there would be no defenses on the edge of the lips. So I managed to take those out. Sending a big swarm of grunts through now, basically to finish all this. The mind, or the idea here is I know that he's producing a lot of snipers, so I'm going to send in 100 fast light units. Whereas in the middle I know there's no heavy defenses, so I'm going to send in all my heavier units. You can see these Marauders making it to the eco of pink through the back line there. Blowing all that up means that there's no more metal production here, dropping it from whatever he was just mere moments ago down to 10 metal, which I'm sure is much less than he surely was at before. Now, a better play would have been to split a few of these Marauders off and just use 1 or 2 of these to destroy those reactors. Could have been a swifter way to achieve victory there, but who's really picky? And at this point, hopes are raised, right? Like the whole team is sort of rallied because all the front lines that were being pushed back way beyond where our regular lines were are suddenly way ahead, and that's just such a nice feeling and beyond all reason when you're suddenly going from this losing position. The saying that I like to use is clutching defeat from the jaws of victory, except that would be the Eastern team here. Now Boogie is doing his best. He set up these labs to spam a bunch of T1. Not a bad response to the Marauder, although the Marauder trade extremely efficiently. If you can spam enough T1, you can definitely put in a lot of hurt. Now I think for some reason I saw this army coming in, either a scout plane or whatever it was. I guess I just saw the radar blips here. I decided to send a bunch of my sprinters up that have just been idly queued. Kind of just forgot that they were queued out of this T2 lab. And just send them up north to basically help deal with this wave. And I think that was a good idea, because although there was a lot of flamer units here, it would have been pretty damaging to his defense, which I didn't really want to have to reinforce with. Now you can see these Marauders causing a lot of pain here. They take down Bugis, his commander, but at this point I don't quite know where his base is. I'm sort of like looking around for it. You can see with that Marauder trying to find it. And I think eventually I spot what I thought was his base, which is over here. Taking out a few of these. Chain react all those, which is always nice. Blade Runner manages to get in the way of... He must have taken this base right here and gets in the way of whatever Marauder I was sending up towards red. Boogie is now on sort of a last attempt, but all those sprinters I had, I basically just queued out towards red's base, because now I sort of knew where it was. And it was just too much. At this point, I just had the overwhelming lead. There was too much metal down here that I was able to reclaim. All of these butlers were able to reclaim a bunch of the metal that was just left behind here, meaning that suddenly I jumped from 100 metal per second to 250 metal per second, which is just overwhelming when it's put up against any one player. Now these sprinters, they find the commander and I decide to focus it down. I think I saw a pitbull shot that missed and actually hit the commander there. That's interesting. Don't see that very often. Now you can see Synthetic starting up his own T1 spam. It's very nice. Sort of a good counter for this sort of spam. And this army of cataphracts, which is just daunting. I mean, these fire a laser comparable to the laser that's on the top of a Titan. The blue laser, long-range laser of doom. There you can see it go. Just totally devastating. I also love these because they remind me of the tanks from Star Wars. And hopefully, you know, Disney doesn't come after me for a simple mention of the name, but yeah, what an awesome tank unit. It fires away here. I definitely like these a lot more than the Armada equivalent. But now they're on their last legs, and you can see I've started up bombers out of this. One scout craft to 10 bombers, just because I know that I'll basically probably know where I'm trying to bomb. And indeed, so I send these scout craft out to try and find an area, and that's another point of learning. You always want to make sure that you're scouting, even if you're in the end of the game and you know you're not really, you're pretty sure you know where things are. It's better to have the accuracy. So I drop all these bombs on the last of Blade Runner's production here, shutting down this T2 and T1 facility, and then dropping a bunch of bombs here onto Bugis's base. One of his bases, I suppose. At the same time, moving a bunch of Marauders in. You can see that they're going to take out all of these, cause a chain reaction, and that is going to be the last of Bugis's economy. Yeah, what an epic turnaround from losing on all fronts to suddenly reclaiming enough metal and building the right units and really surgically putting them in the right spot to be able to attack and destroy their economy. Definitely a turnaround and a half. And I type a fun little message here at the end of this game. Hope this convinced everyone to have faith in the back line, and that's definitely the takeaway that I want to give everyone here, because you're playing the front line, and your job is to stall for that back line, because you have to trust that they're building up those resources to make the difference on the map. And well, anyway, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.